Yeah, it's
Okay.
audible. We can start the meeting. You can start it. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Respected Dr. Sonia George, respected HOD, faculty members, and dear participants. So, this is the second day of our webinar series, and today we are discussing a very serious topic, gender and labor debates, discussing the informal. So actually, the relationship between gender and informal work is a much debated, and it is an apt topic that we have. Dr. Sonia George is with us today, and gender in its usual connotations imply a variety of relational concepts according to various social, cultural, and geopolitical contexts, including race, ethnicity, sexuality, and whatnot. Religion, age, ability, everything. Of course, we can attach umpteen other variables to it. Please unmute, dear participants, please unmute your. Okay. So, okay, so that it is audible. So, when we talk about the informal setting, so always we know that so much exploitation is involved in the informal and formal are the orthodox conventions, which I think should not be thought or understood as dichotomous. They are one and the same nowadays because majority of the formal sectors involve in its underlayers informal work or labor. So it is based on their profit. It is profitable when the informal workers are involved. And we know that the women are underpaid in the informal sector, and I think now they are, even though we are expected to get equal wages for equal work, a more amount of work is done by women laborers in the construction sector and all. We witness it on a daily basis, and they are getting lower wages when the men are 900 or 1000. Quoted in almost all the literature, and we know that. And another sector is the household work, maid servants, and all those sectors. And those sectors are also working as informal laborers, and they work 24/7, and they are underpaid in many cases. And some cases when some institutional attachments are there with those workers, then they are getting some wage raise. So otherwise, in the conventional way, they are underpaid, and it is evident that these things are discussed very on a global basis. When we ponder over the division of labor from the feminist viewpoint and all those things, we see that people are very eloquent when they speak about gender issues in that way, the exploitation, gender-wise exploitation and all. But in fact, the stage of the status of the laborers, women laborers, they stay like that. They are not they are not getting the laborers. Their what you call their awareness, lack of awareness regarding the change in the society is much exploited now also. And today I think we talk upon such topics, such issues will be included in the speech. Mrs. Dr. Sonia George, I have to introduce her also, and she is the General Secretary of Seva Union in Kerala. Seva means the short form of Self-Employed Women's Association, is it? And that union is having a national and even global framework. I remember that I have seen her interview in the Hindu some 2 years back, 2018 or so, like that. I don't remember. It is like a previous date. And in that, she has attended the ILO conference, Geneva conference, and then the feedback were given. So she was eloquent upon the research and gender, and as such, she is associated with this work, this activism for at least 25 years. And she is a researcher, done her PhD in social science with gender studies, and it is from the School of International Relations. And I know that you are expecting much from her, and she will surely suffice your needs, and there will be an open discussion and a welcome wholeheartedly Dr. Sonia George to her talk. Madam, can you hear me? Now it's your time, can take over.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Asha, for the contextual introduction of the topic, and also thanks for introducing me. It's my honor to be part of this webinar organized by School of Pedagogical Science of MG University. And I'm happy to be an alumni of MG University. I have studied in, as she has introduced, in the School of International Relations. And maybe for the past many years, I have associations with various universities and labor. So even though I'm an activist and means a full-time activist involved in working with the informal sector women workers in the country, I am too much attached to academics, and also still I'm a good scholar, I believe. Still I'm learning. So happy to be part of such a large audience from various parts of the country. And thank you once again for inviting me for this seminar, webinar. I don't have a PowerPoint or something I'll be speaking. I think I'll introduce the topic for some time, and then we can have discussions that may be useful. And you can stop me at any time, send me a message, or you can raise your hands, or whatever it is. Means if I'm going too fast, or what I'm seeing is not communicating, or some technical issues, or whatever it is. We don't know this technicality. Sometimes suddenly the internet will stop. So it will be helpful for us to mutually support in the process. So thank you. Ma'am has introduced the topic, gender and labor. I think it will be once again, may I request all of you to mute your mic, because otherwise, see, this echoing is coming in again. Hello?
Hello.
It's okay, ma'am.
Hello.
No, it's okay, ma'am. You can
It's
continue.
okay? Okay. Fine. So this is labor. Labor itself is a very large topic, and gender itself is a vast, broad topic. So I'm trying to combine together gender and labor issues in the context of the informal. That is what my role here today is. We all know what labor is. Means we all are familiar with it. We all are familiar with the term gender, we all are familiar with the term labor also. And we know we all are involved in one or other kind of labor, means in different parts of the country. And we know that labor is not just an activity that produces capital, it's a human capacity. And it's not only a commodity. Means there are tendencies to look at labor as a commodity. From the earlier times onwards, we can see that um, um, labor is labor is looked upon as a community, something that produce monetary value, and something that has to produce monetary value. That is the always the understanding of labor we have. But it is an activity that produces society itself. And the network of sociality means, and all the subjects that are included in means men and women, old and young, youth, and all kinds of natural resources involved in it, all kind of human resources involved in it. So it different institutions, as we all know, like family, the state, the organizations, trade organizations, public bodies, all kinds of things are involved in that. And with that, labor produces an identity too. Means for a person to understand. Professor Asha was introducing some sectors like domestic workers or informal. See, labor is an identity too. It represents our gender, means who we are. It represents our caste. It represents the class relations. So something, why we have to talk about something formal, something is formal and something is informal. That is something. And why we have to talk about something men and something women, or beyond men and women. So these are some of the things that we are trying to connect it: formal, informal, men, women, beyond men, women relationships. So how could we understand those relationships? And basically labor is a production relationship that is happening in the society. So production relationships always has a tendency to relate it to what you call value. What could be the output of that production? So how do we measure the production? These are all criteria that now the society is looking after. Means what are you doing, how do you produce, what value it evolves in that course of production. So there, I think the question of when we look at it, the question of gender is coming up. How do we bring gender relations in that particular human, or particularly that human activity that is centered around production relations? And we can see that labor history, traditionally, the traditional labor histories uh, has comparatively what you call ignored this complex relationships of labor with different forms of identity like gender, caste, class, that was not discussed. Rather, it was discussed on an economic platform. So how I think here my attempt is to go beyond, or take us beyond the discussions, beyond an economic base. Labor has so many other values that is functioning around us, and it is a social determination or a social situation that is emerging out of this relationship. And I think maybe many of you are familiar with the term sexual division of labor. So, as labor relations were producing, when we look at the history of labor relations, production relations, or gender relations that is happening in the society, the early history, the pre-industrial society, the pre-modern societies. When we look at the pre-modern societies, always know the labor relations or the work relations that was exhibited in that kind of societies had no such kind of divisions that could be do. Everybody means people know really they were wanderers. No, they were living together. There was no such kind of monogamous familial relationships that we are trying to speak about now. So men and women had equal roles. Everything they wanted, it was called mostly a domestic economy, a domestic structure where men and women gathered together, produced together, sustained together, survived together. So that is where the history of humankind starts. So from there, this whole concept of division of labor slowly started with, people started moving around, people started going out and finding things, hunting societies, gathering societies, where naturally when the reproductive capacity was due on women, that to produce the next generation was due on women, then that has been taken as an advantage for the other, means for the male to go around and collect things and come back. That is how slowly this division of labor was happening. This we had really created divisions in terms of sex of a person, that is male or female, that we know it's a very common notion. I'm not saying something new. So, but how do we understand this sexual division of labor? That is what, how could social realities constructed the sexual division of labor? That is more important. So skills normally started getting equated to the sexual division of labor. Who has this skill? What are the skills that? But early societies say that skills like farming, means agricultural skills, traditional artisanal skills like weaving, knitting, means handwork, embroidery, and preservation of food, all those skills were related to women. That is what the early society is saying. But slowly, when the kind of production relations started shifting from home, so all kinds of production relations which were at home, when it started shifting to outside the society, this production relations changed. The skills associated with it started getting a different kind of understanding, and the skills and the production relation based on the skills created the sexual division of labor, where women were always considered as natural reproductive agents who had the responsibility of the home, the household economy. So when the sexual division of labor, when it started shifting from or the economy started shifting from the household to the outside world, to the industrial world, this division of labor became very sharp. So that means men started going out in the industrial. That is even a shift in the society, starting from home to the industry. It can be factory, it can be a common workplace, wherever it is. That means from the home-based economy, it started as public means of production, where factory or any other kinds of mines or whatever it is, that kind of production relations have started. And naturally men started going out and men became the laborers, and women started being at home, still looking at the household economy, household production, household reproductive activities. And this is the kind of relationship that has emerged as part of this sexual division of labor. And this sexual division of labor, we have to look at it not only from a male female perspective, but it has to be looked at from an international economic perspective also. Basically, division of labor within, there are two frameworks that we are discussing: old division of labor and new division of labor. Old division of labor, we can see that it is the industrialized society, where industrialized production was happening, where people go out to work, they earn from that, and from that relationship, the so-called the existing model or the familiar model for all of us is men as the breadwinner, or male as the breadwinner, and female as the supporting person in the family. That is the kind of role that has emerged, and still this model is very common. Even if in a family, even if in an educated family, if men and women still work, uh, we can see, the reproductive roles or the household chores, all those are female responsibilities now. Even if the society has changed, this household dynamics has not changed yet. Maybe for you, maybe it's very familiar. This means in many families, maybe husband and wife may be working together, they are professionals. Maybe many of us still now have a third person to look after us. We pay for that service, but still, when it comes to reproductive activities, child rearing activities, looking after the sick, looking after the old, the parents in the family, it goes naturally, the responsibility goes to women. So still the society work on this industrialized division of labor, where male is the breadwinner and female is the supportive person, that is who is inside the household. So that was the notion that was emerged as part of the industrialized old division of labor. But as part of, especially after the Second World War and all, the whole scenario, the entire scenario it was changing. Economic relationships got changed. We are familiar with the terms of globalization, neoliberalism, that kind of no economic policies that shifted the entire globe. The economic crisis that was happening, we put in, there is no more an Indian economy, that we cannot speak about India as an economic self-sustainable country. India could be seen in relationship with many other countries. That is the kind of trades being opened, borders being getting opened, labor being able to move beyond borders. We have seen all those kind of relationships that was happening. But that kind of situation has emerged into a new situation called the new international division of labor. So this new international division of labor has so many new attributes or new characteristics that we could notice. We can see that in this new international division of labor, we were talking about the industrial society as something that was so centralized, with men being the producers and women being at home. But when the new international division of labor has come, um, we started knowing about multinational companies, some international companies holding the control of the entire production processes, and some countries, like especially the global south, has turned to be the laborers. People from the global south has become part of the international labor force, and they became the majority of the labor force in the at the international level. And that happened where, when we thought about this mass production, when the industrial society was talking about mass production, this new international division of labor made it a flexible specialization. You can be flexible. Mass production at a common production centers got decentered. Production process was decentralized. Large batches of production became small batches of production. Standardized products became no differentiated products. And the concept of mass markets has become niche markets. And from a rigid place of work, like kind of production, it became flexible. So I can say an example. See, if H&M we are familiar with H&M. It's a large garment production company in the world. It's a multinational supply chain in the world. And H&M, the products that comes in the name of H&M, not at all is produced in a particular place. We can see that there are laborers in India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, or Myanmar producing H&M products. Some places, maybe if it's a shirt, the stitching of hands could be made in India, and the stitching of the buttons could be made in Sri Lanka, and the final production could be made in Bangladesh. So this is where, what I'm saying, from mass production, the production has become decentralized. The supply chain has become so scattered that there is no common visibility of the employer. So that was one of the common shift that has happened. We are familiar with the model of employer. There is an employer who is providing employment for us. He or she or that company is providing employment, and we are the employers. employees under that particular employer. But when this new division of labor happened, employer became invisible. The presence of employer-employee relationships was slowly diluting. And when I was saying about this chain of production of a garment, of a shirt, I was explaining, the person who is producing a button or is stitching a button or stitching a cuff of the shirt has no direct contact with the employer, who is the H&M management, the direct H&M management. So thousands of links are produced within that. So this is a global supply chain that has happened. So this is where the centralized production has become decentralized. Mass production has become flexible specialization. You can become a specialized agent, a specialized worker with a button stitching expert. You are a button stitching expert. I can say another very familiar example for you all, for all of us in Kerala, where Kerala, it's one of my studies also, so I'm interested to share that example. Kerala, umbrellas are very famous in Kerala. And, we all know that there was only one factory in Kerala who was producing umbrellas. It was St. George Umbrellas. And now it has splitted when the sons took the responsibility of the main father's business. It's Poppy and St. John's. It's familiar. It is an international brand now. Means they are the most quality producing umbrellas in the world. So when you look at this, the entire industry, when you look at the records of Poppy or St. John's as an umbrella making industry, umbrella manufacturer, they have no production centers in Kerala. Their base is in Kerala. They're saying they have no production centers in Kerala. They have production centers in Maharashtra. They have production centers in Tamil Nadu. That is what they are saying in official records. That is the official declaration that they have given to the state government. But when you look at the reality, when you go to Alappuzha, which is the base, which is the place of this umbrella industry, you can see that the entire small households in Alleppey district, where the women who are the home-based workers, who are sitting at their home and working, this entire umbrella by pieces are distributed to these women with very exploitative working situation. They don't know who is Poppy. They don't know who is the management of Poppy. They don't know who is the management of St. John's set piece, either to put the cover of the umbrella, either to put the handle, whatever it is, piece rate. Somebody is bringing, some third or fourth party or middle person is bringing to them these pieces, and they're getting these pieces, and they have to give that pieces back with proper quality production, whatever they have that particular skill, and they are paid very less. It's very exploitative. One example is that, which I'm saying or quoting always, is that for the umbrella, making the structure of the umbrella, that is the finest, that is the hardest job in that. Means it's very sharp edges and all. So a person who is getting 12 dozens, 1 dozen is 12 and 12 dozen is 144 pieces. 144 pieces of umbrellas, putting the structure together, this particular person is getting, and it depends upon the speed, how much time they take to produce these 144 pieces. That producing that can take minimum 1.5 days. People do, or women do, maybe 3 days or like that. So for this 144, fixing that 144 pieces, they are getting 140 rupees. And that is happening in Kerala, where such a labor progressive atmosphere is there. And people are saying, no, Kerala is so labor friendly, laborers are so much respected, and there is so much of rights for the working class in this country. So these women who are doing 144 pieces of umbrella are getting 140 rupees after the end of 1.5 or 2 days or 3 days of work. So this is a very easy example or simple example of the process that I'm trying to say under the new international division of labor, where the process of production was very, distributed, decentralized, where the employer is invisible and the worker is in the margin, is in the lowest tier of the production process, where employer-employee has no relationships and the middle person's trying to produce or trying to control the production process. And this is where women, so the women who are involved in this production process, they are not, even when a census or a documentation goes to a particular place, for example in this Alleppey, for this umbrella workers, none of these women can enter their name as workers or laborers, and they are not considered as workers. The public will say that they are working, it is a time pass, it is a leisure time activity for them after their all household chores that they are looking after. They are means they have some free time, and for that free time they are just getting some little income. That is the notion, that is the public, and this is what the entire new division of labor, new gender division of labor, and new understanding of production that is happening, that we are talking about, where informalization is happening at each level. And we are in a country, means India, where 95% of the working force in this country, with a country, in a country where 500 million workforce, according to the official data, are there, more than 95% of the workforce in this country are involved in this kind of job. Part-time, casual, flexible. No, these are the kind of formations that is happening. Another form that is happening is entrepreneurialism. We are familiar with entrepreneurs now. We know this is a time when state is talking about creating enterprises, more and more startups. We are talking about that, and majority of the youngsters in the country would have been involved in this, small startups, small business enterprises, and all. This is another peculiarity of the new International Division of Labor. So in this new International Division of Labor, when I'm talking about enterprises, it's the full responsible person. He or she is the employer and he or she is the employee too. There is no such even employer-employee relationship happening. In our time, in people who work with labor studies, we use the term self-employed to look at these persons. Rather than looking at self-employed, the society is interested to look them as entrepreneurs, which has a dignified status, where we say that owning a business enterprise is something which creates dignity. But in reality, this is not a dignified process of labor. What we are saying, but understanding us as self-employed means giving us some sort of a different identity, where we are a workforce. We are part of the workforce in this country, where we have all rights as a worker, where we are doing our work with what you call following all the process to become an employer in this country and also an employee in this country. There may be people working around us. So it has to be, without understanding it as an employment process, the society or this new International Division of Labor terms us as entrepreneurs. So this is the second type of job that is seen as part of this new international division. So this is another form of informalization that is being created. And the next form is, we can see that this new, we are familiar with the special economic zones. See, as part of this shifting of the economic policies, apart from all the centralized production processes that was happening in the country as part of in the globe as part of the industrialized working pattern, we have seen new kinds of production units, processing zones were created in different parts of the world, where the entire production is concentrated under one umbrella of it has no relation with the labor department of the country. It's completely under the commerce department of the country, and there are no labor laws to be followed in that economic zone. And you could see the kind of workforce in that particular processing zones. The employees will be, the workers will be young women who are from 18 to 30 years, maximum 30 years of age, who are in search of work or for a next phase of their life, and who as part of their terrible situations of poverty or terrible situations at home, in order to sustain them for a specific period of time, they migrate to this economic processing zones and they are employed there with very minimal money and also no other social security or no protection at all in the employment space. And this is the floating population. And when these girls are getting married, they'll go out of the job. And if those girls are pregnant, they are pregnant means no more job. They'll be naturally terminated from the workplace. And there is no proper recording. There are no proper payrolls or work roles, nothing in that particular labor economic zones that is taking place. So this is another form of new international division of labor where the formation is like that. Flexibility, that is something, no, anytime the resource or the energy of the labor could be flexible. That is something that is very important. Casual, anytime it could be employed. If you want, you can call. If you want, you can stop. Maybe another term which is very familiar is hire and fire. Means you can hire and anytime you want to fire, you can fire. Hire and fire. Or docility means the kind of who are organizing, who have no other forms of resistance, who would not raise their voice as part of, in terms of increasing salary or increasing facilities in the workplace. That is what docility is. And also the nimble fingers and the nimble fingers. So all these qualities are associated with women in the informal. So that is how the producing of this informal women workers as part of the new informal or new international division of labor with new gender divisions of labor that is taking place in the society is formed. So these are some of the specialities that this new international division of labor is being considered. And when you think about that, it has no long-term sustained relationships. First of all, no employer-employee, no fixed employment, no fixed wages, no fixed contracts, and no proper recording at anywhere. And after some time, after few years, they are out of the labor force. So they are not coming under NSSO surveys. No, they are not coming under census surveys. None of the data collection process of the country is able to record them at anywhere. So another thing that you could see that is the trends for the last few years is that the official data shows that number of women in the labor force is declining in a very fast rate. That is some of the official. So when you look at the last 15 years of NSSO surveys, you can see that the labor force participation of women is drastically, coming down, declining. This is the reason for that. See, arranging or delineating or separating women in a space that employee relationship, and that is not counted as work itself, how could the labor force participation could be recorded in a proper way? So this is something that the contradiction in this new division of labor that we have to see. That means the employer has no responsibilities. Shifting. So in somewhere I was referring to the example of Alapi. So we were telling as part of I'm a trade union person. I work with women workers. So we were asking these women to join, organize together. So all these women are afraid. We will not join any union because once we join and once we raise our voice, soon the employer will shift their workspace. They will shift to a next place very easily because they don't need any proper infrastructure. They need only some homes, some private homes of some people. If it is an Alapi today, they can tomorrow easily shift to Palakkad or they can easily shift to Tamil Nadu. This is the history of this kind of labor shifting that is happening in this society. So that means people are afraid to raise their voice. So even without raising their voice, they will not be recorded anywhere as employees. So they may not have any kind of protection the state is offering in terms of minimum wages, in terms of social security, in terms of dues like bonus or gratuity or any kind of dues as a proper employee that all the working people in this world are enjoying. All these working class rights are earned as part of very strong struggles, centuries of struggles of the working class in the world. No, from no, as part of ILO, International Labor Organization. This is the 2019 was the 100th year of International Labor Organization, where we are now with 190 convention, 90th convention. So relating to labor, there are 190 conventions in the world, and the first convention is right to minimum wage and right to 8 hours of working. So, starting from there are 190 conventions, out of which none of these conventions or none of the labor legislations in the world or in the country are applicable to this particular working class, who are the majority of the working class in the country. So this is where how we can say gender and informality, how it acts together to exploit or to increase the production relation. So the production is increased, more and more products are being made. That means the profit of the company, of the parent company, is increasing without much expense. So the H&M International Division of Labor in the H&M process says that when H&M sells a shirt in the brand for rupees 1,500 to 3,000, uh, the worker, the least worker who is producing a buttons or who is producing the cuff or who is putting together the stitch parts together, the labor altogether, they are spending only 85 rupees in one piece of shirt they are producing, or they are selling for 1,500 or between whatever brand. No, the price increase with the brand. So, but 85 rupees is the total cost of production they are doing for a job. Likewise, the cost of umbrella, I'm saying, with all the labor, including maximum cost that they are spending for producing an umbrella will be 50 rupees, but the cost will be 5 to 10 times more of the cost of production. And the laborers, who are in the least, in the supply chains, who are in the least tiers, who are work means there is no proper workplace. For many years we are saying about now all the women who are involved in this unorganized production process. Nobody speaks about their occupational health. Means when I'm working from my home, who should speak about my occupational health? I'm working in a corner of my home where I'm not disturbance to any other person. I'm sitting at there and working, and there is nobody to look after whether I have electricity, whether I have proper machines, whether I have water, whether I have proper sanitation facilities. Nobody is looking at. So there is no question of occupational health or general health of the worker involved in it. So these are the peculiarities of informalization. Another working relationship that Asha ma'am was mentioning about the household work, the domestic laborers that we were speaking about. That is again another important workforce that has emerged out of this new international division of labor. We know that, as part, especially in the developed countries, where men and women started working, or after this fall of the division of labor at the first phase, when new international division of labor came in the developed countries, when women also had a chance to work together with men, many of the countries needed the service of the third person to do look after the care work. So now care work has become a main component of the national or international economic discussions, where most of the care workers in this world are women. Most of the care work that being offered, you can see, as you can nurse or a teacher, that are the dignified care works. All those kind of stereotypic jobs are being offered by or offered to and offered by women. That is something that we have to look at it. That is the I think you have a session on gender stereotypes and you will discuss it more. I'm not going to do more detailed discussion on that. apart from those kind of dignified jobs that we think today, there are so many undignified domestic care jobs, looking after the sick in a family, looking after the children, looking after those who is like postnatal care, reproductive responsibilities of a woman. All those kind of care work are offered by women from a different social class and caste. That means, again, this question of nimble fingers or docility, or those who will not raise their voice, but those who are in need. Means we have done a study of domestic workers in Kerala, where we represent, and looking at especially the migrant domestic workers, we are seeing many women from this country, this state, Kerala, is going to Gulf countries to work as domestic workers. When we had a survey, or when we had a study on the socio-economic conditions of these workers, all of them, means most of them have a separated family atmosphere, abandoned husbands, widowed women, or single women responsibilities, extreme poverty situations, being the sole responsible person of the entire family. This person was forced to migrate to some other country to work as a domestic worker. And in India, there are strange laws to facilitate this production. If you want to migrate as a domestic worker, you cannot migrate below 30 years. Means if you are 28 years, you are not supposed to migrate to a Gulf country or any other country as a domestic worker. But that law is there, that ban is there. But the situation is that what I'm saying is that this unauthorized nexus, that is where everywhere this labor is really, really becoming informal. This unauthorized illegal network that is producing, there are agencies who will produce passport for these women, which says that they'll be 25 or 22 or 23, even, they'll be 30, 31 or 32, even if they are 22, 20 or 23. There are agencies who can, one embassy we have identified, especially we have heard about, recently we have heard about this plane crash. Before that, this Mangalore plane crash was one of the biggest accident that we have heard about. This incident was revealed in that plane crash is that there is an embassy known, means it's called Kasargod Embassy. It is an unauthorized embassy which produces passports, fake passports, with whatever, means they can even cut the heads, they can even increase the ages according to the need of that particular country. And many of these women have been migrated using this unauthorized, illegal, fake passports, forged passports, with their age being forged about 30 years, and they are going to a different country to enter into the care work as domestic workers, or as what you call health assistants, or whatever it is. And there is no such proper contract, and the employers, we know the kafala system that is happening. When we have to go, it's there was a movie in Malayalam where many of you were familiar about the Gadamas. So these women who go there with this illegal status, they are being exploited. They don't have proper contracts. They will not be paid money after many years of work. Their entire documents will be with the kafal, the sponsor, and the kafal can treat them like anything in any exploitative situations. And many of them have been escaped from those exploitative situations, and they had to wait for the amnesty declarations to come back to the place empty-handed. So these are the regulations of informality that I would like to share with you. Means regulations becoming irregular, and identities being adjusted to become that if they go to some place to work, or they go to another country, they can make their family surviving. They can give their, or they can make their situation better. They can feed their children. But the kind of irregularity being produced are pushing them out of the labor force, so that they come back, or if they deport from a particular country as part of this irregular process, they may not be able to enter into that country anytime further. So this is what is happening at different levels. This is the kind of informality being produced at different levels in the society. So I think I'm speaking too much at the situation, and I have I have tried to explain about this new international division of labor in relation to the producing informality at many levels. And here I'm trying to just two more points for my discussions. How do we look at, as researchers or as students or as people interested in feminist gender studies or labor studies or educational studies, how do we look at the situation? Can we develop an alternate methodology to explain this informality, this new international division of labor, where the world of labor is producing only informal working situations. Informality is being produced. As I'm saying, as I started, 95% of the workforce in India is informal. The country has no system still to support the informal. All labor laws are in favor of the formal population, who are just 4 to 5%. Formal, you understand now I think, as who enjoy all the facilities like 8 hours of work or fixed employment, fixed wages, fixed social security, fixed pensions, or fixed ESI, or whatever it is. Only, and 95% of the workforce is out of this, and the country has no system still to include these people in the day-to-day deliberations or in the day-to-day development process. We know, as part, especially when we are doing this webinar in the process or in the context of a pandemic that has been affecting us in a very large scale, severe process. That is why we are virtually meeting. 95% of this workforce in this country, they are out of any protective measures. They don't have jobs. We sit at home and we get money. That is what we think about us. But if those persons are not going to work today, they are not getting any money. I'm part of an organization today. Also, I'm involved in for Kerala. This is Onam system. So I'm networking with the entire state with our members. They're producing at least some products so that during Onam that will be sold so that they are getting some income, because all the domestic workers, the employees have said you should not come to work because you are the carriers of virus. Now, all people who are fish workers, you have heard how this has been a community spread in the fishing area, where women who were the fish vendors, they have been completely stopped of going to work. So this is the reality. And none of the normative system like laws, policies, social systems, state, welfare machineries, none of the systems are able to contain these workers at any levels. So my question or my point for discussion before all of you is, how could we develop a different or an alternate framework, alternate methodology to include these people as part of? They are the more, I'm sure, because this country is surviving or this world is surviving because there were enough food for all of us, and all the foods were produced by these poor workers around the world, but they are not supported at any level. So how could their real position could become no the dominant position of this country? How could they be included in the right process in this country, or how could their contributions to the society to be included? Including, we are saying, when a woman is doing work, their double or triple burden of work involving in production relations, reproductive relations, social reproduction relations. See, now all the voluntary activities are being carried over by this so-called informal. If an NREJ worker, for you can say that an NREJ worker, that worker, she is doing work as part of the government system, and she will be going to her school as the parent representing the of the family. Now the ration, the public distribution system in women's name, entire voluntary activities happening around the family or the society is being concentrated on women. But this is not calculated as work. This is not calculated as value added. That everything is calculated under the name of voluntary. And these are voluntary activities. And this is the triple burden that women follow being part of the informal in this society. And their real work is not measured. So my question is, it is same with Kerala. We have a well-empowered system of Kudumasri network where more than 40 lakhs of women are members All of them are informal workers. None of the contributions in the social reproductive process is not even being documented at that level, understanding it as a right-based, value-added, production-based process which is sustaining. All the farming activities of Kerala is being carried out by this Kudumastri women, but it's not at all calculated at that level. This is where I'm putting before you the questions. How could we measure the activities of women? How could we understand the activities of women? Is it possible to think beyond the proper clock time of 8 hours that we are thinking? Is it proper to identify a space of a proper workspace that we are thinking, sitting in an office, sitting in a factory, or sitting in a school, or sitting in a bank? Other than that, how could we idealize other workspaces like a farm or a street or a market, or a house? It can be your own house where you are a home-based worker. In case of I am referring to the umbrella makers or the garment makers, like thousands of work, or it can be some other persons which I am referring to, a domestic worker who are working inside their own country, care workers. How could we identify the time as no dignified time beyond the normal clock time that is being propagated? I think this is what is lacking in the society. This is what the limitations for us to count them, to measure them as part of the process, to understand the informal in this process. So, as a next step, as researchers or as feminist scholars or educational scholars or whatever discipline you are, my humble request is, can we develop a new methodology to delineate the informal, to understand the informal, and to take them as of course, they are paying, means they are contributing more than 50% to the economy of the country. More than 50% of the savings of this country are the informal sector savings. But in the workforce, they are low. They are not being calculated as equal producers. Their wages are very low. They don't have any social security safety nets in this country when such kind of pandemics or other disasters are coming to support them. If they don't have work, means no pay. If they don't have any means of income, means no means of income. No society, no government, no state system is able to put them in that frame, who are the main contributors of the society, and there are no recognition process as such. And I think the present normative system is a failure to address the needs of this particular class of the society, and we should go beyond understanding or go beyond calculating, measuring, to a new system, new framework, new methodology, so that formalization of the informal in this country, gendering process of the political economy, where the contribution of these people in the process, especially the women informal workers in this country, could be identified, could be recognized, and properly. Thank you. I'm happy to interact with you.
Thank you, madam.
ശരിക്കും മോണിക്കേനോട്
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I'm hearing.
Yeah. Thank you for the vivid presentation, and it was really an eye-opening speech, making it clear that whether old or new, the gender imbalance is more or less the same. And to count the informal and regarding them equally in the production sector is a challenge. So now I invite comments from the audience. Hello, Shibu. Hello.
Ma'am. Hello.
Shibu, is there? Can you read the comments from the chat box if there are any questions first?
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Let me see the comment.
Okay. Or shall we move to the audience comments? Hello, Sibu?
Just I'm going to learn. Let me.
Yeah. Okay.
Gender and labor concerns, particularly for the informal sector. It's gender in terms of the prioritizing the distribution, livelihood, and opportunity. That has come. I don't know whether it is a question or not. It was shared by.
Actually, I'm seeing some questions whether capitalism means exploitation, no, or how to protect the informal unorganized labor in an alternate, suggest some alternate way. These are some of the questions that I'm seeing.
You can give explanations to those questions in the chat box.
If anybody has questions, you can put it in the chat box or you can ask, no problem. So maybe I'll explain this capitalist system. Of course, capitalism means exploitation. See, the entire approach of the capitalists in the world was to exploit the labor force to make maximum profit. So all the businesses, the entire world is based on this maximum profit making business, maximum surplus, and from there, include how do we make profit out of it, and through that is where the labor is being exploited at different levels in production, not being recognized, like the entire process I was mentioning of scattering the production process, without any proper production process, without direct control of the employer has no relationship with the workers at any points, many tiers of working force, from the management to the supervisor to the middle person to the least person who are working in their home or in a small production unit. So that will be more familiar to us. So outsourcing could be means an easy way to explain. Everything is outsourced in this process. That is the capitalist process, and we don't think that we can get anything, any kind of protective measures from the capitalist production process. No, it's not possible. That is why we are depending on the states. Before the states, the state used to have a welfare approach. The welfare model of governance was there, where the state was able to protect its citizens when there is need or when as a worker or whatever it is. But now we can see that everything is becoming privatized, more and more foreign investments, no public spaces. All public enterprises or public limited companies or public sectors are under threat, under deterioration. Nothing is being sustained. All the traditional sectors have been completely, carried away or faded away from the mainstream society. New forms of privatization, private employment, we can see in the health, in education, in labor, or whatever fields that we are interacting, everything is privatized. And that is the achievement of the capitalist process, making things privatized, withdrawing governments, forcing governments from the entire welfare activities that they are involved in, and trying to put maximum money to get maximum money back. And that is why we know that 1% of the entire world have more than 73% of the world's wealth. That is the dichotomy, or that is the contradiction that is happening as part of the capitalist process. That is what we are looking at. And the second question that I'm seeing is on how to protect the informal. This is a question that we have been asking for many years. How do we protect, or how do we build up a supportive system for the informal? The existing system, I'm sure it's not able to protect the informal at any way. There is no protection. No work means no work. Tomorrow you don't have to come to work means you don't have to come to work. There is no other alternative for us. But actually, the states can make many different forms of no supportive mechanisms to include these workers. We have been now looking at, you have, I don't know how many of labor law reforms. Most of the labor laws in the reforms, labor law in the country is now being under threat. The country is bringing 4 labor codes, trying to merge labor codes, labor laws, and trying to say that to make it simple or simplify the entire process. That means the existing rights of the working class also being questioned. No to right to organize, right to collective bargaining. The entire ILO conventions now is being questioned in this country. So I think we are shrinking to less space to protect our rights. That is where we are. That is why I'm saying researchers or academicians have a role to bring back bring a different system to address this crisis that the present ideology is facing, and how do we build together one alternate framework, alternate methodology. For example, maybe I'll say a few words about SEWA, where I'm representing. SEWA is a national central union of women workers. We have more than 25 lakhs workers. All women workers, poor women workers in the informal sector. All of them are poor, who are domestic workers or home-based workers or embroidery workers or fish workers or street vendors or construction workers or whoever it is. But from its inception, that is, it started in 1972. SEWA has started in 1972 as part of supporting the women workers who have lost their employment in the textile industry, textile mills in Western India, in Ahmedabad, Bombay, in different parts of Western India. And when this formation as a labor union was started under the guidance of our founder Ila R. Bhatt, we call her fondly as Ila Ben. No, she was very concerned, was very clear that it should be a labor session, it should be a trade union where workers people have been left out of the workforce, but who are trying to find an alternate form of employment for themselves. That means they are standing on their own, like vendors, or agricultural workers, or livestock producers, or whatever it is, or embroidery workers, but they are standing on their own. So different needs of the people, like they are not literate, means they have to be made literate. They don't have any proper childcare facilities. So SEWA has developed around 200 cooperatives, which it has a child, which has a little means education cooperative, childcare cooperative. SEWA has its own bank where more than 10 lakhs of this informal sector women are the shareholders of this bank, which has a nationalized position bank. SEWA has its own academy where women themselves are videographers and photographers and capacity building trainers. They have become, women have become, means if it is like developing a local economy. Like if you are feeding a cow or if you are looking after a cattle, there will be a cattle doctor, a veterinary doctor from the women themselves who have been nurtured by SEWA so that she will be available for the service. If you're looking for a market, there will be a marketing representative from the women who will facilitate your marketing needs. If you have some production units, there'll be different women who can link together so that you can have your own flour mills, you can have your own packing units, you can have your own tailoring units, you can have your own garment making units, where the entire process is being monitored and supervised by the women themselves. So this is the model that SEWA has developed over the years to sustain this poor informal sector working women, where we have now more than 25 lakhs women members all over the country. I'm happy to say that I'm but this is by an organization, and we are forcing the state to look at this model and to implement it at the national level so that more and more questions of informality be addressed. So I think there are some models to exhibit, or some models which are already happening, where you can look at it and see, how could new models of supporting the informal be developed, and how could the state replicate this model so that the informal get their due rights. That is where we are standing now. How far SHG is effective to promote women empowerment both socially and economically? That is the next question. That is what I'm seeing. That's what I'm saying. I explained the example of Kudumbashree in Kerala, which is completely an SHG-oriented movement, and also the entire process, entire employment generation in the country is now based on SHGs. I can say pros and cons for the SHGs. When you are meeting at SHGs, that is a self-help group, you are losing your right as a worker. You are not being counted as a worker in that process. If you are addressing that part also, then SHG will be able to address the situations of the informal to a certain extent. But at the present system of SHG is considering women only as beneficiaries. They are not considered as equal partners in the production process. They are only considered as beneficiaries, where you are getting some loans, thrift and credit. And thrift and credit is the normal process of SHGs. You are seeing it wherever it is, microfinance, thrift and credit, and those kind of process. We are familiar with that process. That will not help to be formal. That's only one. Seva made the women equal partners in the banking process. They became the shareholders, so that they have the equal right to control the banking system. So with that, equal participation in the financial, production, economic, and social process, if that kind of framework, that kind of model is framed, then only we'll be able to address this question. That is my humble experience.
So it was nice that interaction also. And anybody else wants to raise any question more? So
I think one last
hello.
question is: Seva has any special program for the third gender? Seva has third genders are also members of Seva. They are members of Seva, and they work along with other women also. We don't have any special program, but we consider them equally as part of our women membership. That process is happening.
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon. Ma'am, you mentioned about outsourcing. Outsourcing is a practice nowadays, not only in informal sector, but also in formal sector like university, higher education sector also. We can see in higher education sector outsourcing practice like hospitality, campus cleaning, security, etc. That means outsourcing is a practice that is highly prevalent nowadays.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Ismail was asking about outsourcing.
Yes, I heard that. Yeah, that's
outsourcing in formal sector. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying very specifically. Outsourcing this, the security in your university. He is an informal worker. That is informalization. Entire process happening as part of this is informalization. So the present scenario is informalization in the formal sector is also happening. Casual laborers in the formal sector, more and more guest lecturers, that is informal. All those things are informal. That is the informal sector coming into formal practice, formal workspaces. That is also an important change that is happening as part of this new International Division of Labor. Nothing stable, nothing permanent is produced. Everything produced has a temporary kind of nature. That is what no, all we have seen: part-time lectures, part-time jobs, part-time sweepers, or security, no, or whatever it is. Everything is outsourcing. These are all part of the informal process. These are all informalization that is happening, and informalization is becoming the larger reality of the country. That is becoming more and more no, familiar process that is happening within ourselves. And one more question I'm seeing is, don't you think giving basic idea on labor rights from school days? Of course, no, respecting our labor. What could be your labor rights, and how do you look at labor as whatever we are saying? That is what we are trying to say. No, we say that you should domestic worker. We have a practice of calling a domestic worker part-time or who work for 3 hours. What we say our women is, you should not go and no, you should enter into a house and work with your night dress, nightie, and no, using no very casual. We say the domestic workers of Seva, they have a uniform. They go with a uniform. They have a badge. They have an apron as part of the uniform. Your work is dignified. You're working in somebody else's home, no problem. Your work is dignified. You're doing their service. So this is the kind of dignity that we give to all kinds of work, and that is what practice should be there from the school days itself. How could we understand the rights of the laborer, whoever it is, casual or permanent or temporary or whatever it is? That dignity of labor could be understood well. That is what we should teach our children of the next generation.
I think the questions are over. And now, shall we move on to the final session, vote of thanks? So, it was means very enlightening speech, madam, I should say, and with so many new information and the information about the new normal of moving to the outsourcing in every sector of the workforce. From top to bottom, there are informal, and some instances we see now of moving from means moving to the out because of the outsourcing cost to the government also as well. So, shall I invite Dr. Ismail to propose the vote of thanks? Ismail.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University, the visionary leader, Professor Sabu Thomas Sir, beloved Head of the Department, School of Pedagogical Sciences, Professor Minikuti A, respected Dean, Faculty of Education, Professor Jaya Jays, beloved General Convener of the program, Dr. Muhammad KV, Chairperson of the session, Professor Asha JV, Coordinator of the event, Dr. Sibuji Neto, and Chief Guest of the Day, Dr. Sonia George, and other dignified personalities, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of School of Pedagogical Science, Mahatma Gandhi University, and my own behalf, extends a very hearty vote of thanks to all speakers for gracing your important presence and sharing with us your ideas and opinions today. First of all, I would like to propose a hearty vote of thanks to our chief guest of the day, Dr. Sonia George, General Secretary, Self-Employed Women Association, Seva, Kerala, for her efforts towards the invited lecture on gender and labor debates, discussing the informal. Madam, your knowledge, experience, and expertise in the field are important insights for strengthening our social system. We all are inspired and also shocked on your great words. As many participants observed, it was a very nice presentation with lots of facts and analysis of the informal women workforce. All participants have taken note of your observations. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for the chairperson of the session, Professor Asha J. Your active contribution in this session is associated the fruitful discussion on gender and labor debates. We are all encouraged by your great words. Further, we are grateful to the participants. They made queries during the open forum. It was very relevant to our current debates on gender issues. I may like to express our honest thanks to various participants from across the globe who graced us with their thought-provoking ideas, remarks, and also their dignified digital presence. I also wish to express my gratitude to Dr. Muhammad Kevi, General Convener of the webinar, for the successful conduct of the program. And we would like to acknowledge our gratitude to Professor Minikuti, Head of the Department, for providing opportunity to conduct such a wonderful event. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, an event like this cannot happen overnight. It requires planning and preparation. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of faculty members, very motivated and dedicated colleagues like Professor Jaya Jais, Professor T.V. Tulasidaran, Dr. Sajana Jalil, Dr. Sibu Jinato, and other supporting staff, research scholars, emerging students of School of Pedagogy and University,